Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Healy. I'm one of the hosts for our event tonight. This is part of DEFRAG, a hacked film festival by Columbia University, its School of the Art, and its School of the International and Public Affairs, where I am. We wanted to start today by saying we weren't even sure if it made sense to hold this event today, given the tragedy that's unfolding in Ukraine. So we did decide to proceed with humility. Because the topics we're covering here of national security, of war, of hacking, how these fit together do seem relevant to this moment in history. And so we do want to thank you for joining with us today and as we explore those topics. Let me turn first to my colleague with Columbia University School of the Arts, Lance Weiler.
Thanks so much, Jay. Wonderful to see everyone tonight. My name is Lance Weiler. I am a professor of practice in the School of the Arts and also the director of the Digital Storytelling Lab. I wanted to take a moment to thank some folks. I want to thank the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, also UBS Group and Neil Pollard, Arnold A. Saltzman Institute of War and Peace Studies, and the DEFRAG Advisory Board. We're very excited to be here and excited to have you joining us this evening. A couple of housekeeping things. I'll be a panelist and then also I'll drop off, so I'll be on camera and off camera. We'll be doing Q&A through chat within Zoom, and so you can put any questions that you want in there. And then we're also doing some stuff across Twitter. So if you want to use @Columbia DEFRAG and note, we'll also be sharing some hashtags for tonight's event. With that being said, this event is going to take place in two places. It's going to be taking place in Zoom, and it's also going to be taking place in a Miro board. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share with you just a little quick overview of what I mean by Miro and what we're going to be doing and using. So the Miro board will allow us to basically interact with kind of an immersive world that we've created. So with that, you'll be able to kind of move through a number of different aspects of the board. And what we'll do is we'll share with you kind of the way in which you can onboard. So we'll go to the video for that real quick, the video that we have for the onboarding. And there's a couple different ways that you can move through this board. You'll be able to do some commenting. What you see here is effectively a Miro board. And Miro is a way in which you can actually interact with collaboratively. So we'll be sharing some ways in which you can use it. There's some tools, toolbar that you'll see that you'll have access to. The one thing I want to make note of that is important is if you want to zoom in and out, you should be able to zoom in and out. And that is done just by coming up here to the gear and just hitting the preference for mouse or trackpad. So if you're moving side to side, you'll want to go up to the gear and just click preference mouse or trackpad. That'll allow you to kind of move side to side within the board. In addition to that, there's one feature, because we're going to have a lot of you in here, that if you experience any redraw or kind of a lag or performance with the board, you can just go up here to the right, in the right corner here next to the little party horn, and you can just click that, and that will turn on or off your collaborative cursor. So with that being said, what we're going to do is I'm going to pass it back to my colleague, Jay, and we'll provide some additional insight on the board as we get there.
Great. Thank you very much, Lance. And hopefully everyone gets to explore that board. You'll see there's a lot of interactive material for you there. Especially because we decided early on, right, this is about hacking. Hacking is not about sitting back passively as people give you information. It's about getting out there and using your curiosity to explore and to learn new things. And so we wanted to give everyone something to explore. Speaking about hackers and other amazing people, I wanted to introduce our amazing panelist. I'm so excited about this. I waxed my mustache a little bit extra today. We're starting off with Jen Easterly. She is the director of the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency. And there's been a lot of competition, but she's perhaps the nerdiest person to hold that role. Before that, she was at Morgan Stanley, heading their firm resilience. And she had a long career in the Army and intelligence and cyber, including membership in the small team that created Cyber Command. She had multiple tours at the National Security Council, including the Deputy Director for Counterterrorism. She's a Rhodes Scholar after her time at West Point. Please join me in welcoming Jen Easterly. We also have Major General Kevin Hike, call sign Fumes. He is the J3, which means the Director of Operations of NORAD and US Northcom. If you don't know Northcom, it does homeland defense for the United States. He was one of the early pilots to fly the very advanced F-22 fighter, which is super cool in case you don't know Air Force. He also flew F-15s with over 3,000 hours in both airframes, and those hours did include flying NATO missions. Wide range of command assignments, including at European Command, where I'm sure his colleagues right now are especially busy, and we send our thoughts to them. He has solid nerd credentials also, including a computer science degree at my alma mater, the United States Air Force Academy, 1 year ahead of me. Amelie Karan, boy, Amelie has a really hard career to summarize. It really is, because she's done everything from super hard technical engineering, administration, and cybersecurity jobs, but also she worked for Stan Lee, for Disney. She's got deep expertise in US government and technology and security, including having been a chief technology officer. Now she's the director of external technical relations for Electronic Arts, the well-known video game company. And finally, Matt DeVoe, my longtime friend and colleague, who now runs UDA LLC, a cybersecurity advisory company. He's one of the founders of the field of cyber threat intelligence. He's a serial entrepreneur with companies across counterterrorism, intelligence, cybersecurity, especially high-end red teaming. Through his teaching at Georgetown, I have to add personally, he gave me my very first opportunities to lecture students, leading me eventually to be the academic that I am today. So thanks to all of our panelists. And with that, we will get started with the event. So movies, anime, graphic novels, games, right? So many hackers and computer security experts got their earliest influences from culture and storytelling. And for many of us, it was this movie. It was WarGames that got us started, because it was one of the very first that put hacking front and center of the action. And that action isn't just national security, it was national security at the highest stakes, global thermonuclear warfare. So maybe let's go to the board. Lance, turn it over to you, and maybe you can get us started with a clip.
David Lightman was a master at computer games, a fast thinker.
Oh, David! Maybe you could tell us who first suggested the idea of reproduction without sex.
Your wife?
Get out, Lightman.
And a promising student at an old game.
Hi.
With an electronic twist.
Are those your grades?
Yeah. I don't think that I deserved an F. Do you?
You can go to jail for that.
Only if you're over 18.
This computer company is coming out with these amazing new games in a couple of months.
But I want to play those games. Wow.
What?
We got something.
He found the right code word to play the game.
We're in.
But it was the wrong computer.
Shall we play a game?
How can I ask you that?
How about global thermonuclear war?
Fine.
All right.
What the hell? They're trajectory headings for multiple impact re-entry vehicles.
What does that mean?
I don't know, but it's great.
All stations, this is Crystal Palace.
I wonder if I should use my subs.
22 Typhoon-class submarines departing Petropavlovsk.
What in the hell's happening here?
Oh my God.
Shall we play?
I have 7, correction 8. That's 8 Redbirds. Get on the sack. Tell them to flush the bombers.
Russians are still denying everything, sir.
Who are you working with?
Nobody.
Why don't I believe you?
Overday, we have Soviet missile warning.
Placed under arrest pending indictment for espionage.
Espionage?
Confidence is high. I repeat, confidence is high.
Cobra Dane, is this an exercise?
Negative, this is not an exercise.
Get me the president on the horn.
It's still playing the game. It's gonna start a war.
Close up the mouth.
Where?
game or is it real?
WarGames, playing soon at a theater near you.
Shall we play?
Ah, man, that did a cool trailer. I still get goosebumps on that. It reminds me, I gotta set my phone to ring as that ooga ooga, which I'm sure Fumez is already is. So Jen, let's start off with you. When did you first see the movie and what was your reaction to this, right? What seemed fascinating or interesting or ring true or false to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's awesome to be here with this great group. Tough day for many of us, but I'm glad to be able to spend a little bit of time with the great group of folks. I think I was in 10th grade, 9th grade, probably around the same time that you were and Fumez. When the movie came out. I'm a huge movie fan anyway. And I remember vaguely, to be honest, but I do remember being in the theater and seeing this movie. And you sort of have to take a step back and situate yourself in the time. Because of course, this was the era of Ronald Reagan. I was a kid that grew up in the Beltway. My father worked in the Pentagon. My mother worked in the administration and housing and urban development. And, the whole idea of the big battle against the Soviets, the Cold War was still going on, had a real significant impact on me. And I think it was part of the reason why ultimately I decided to join the military and went off to West Point, the superior military academy, just so we all agree on that, Fumez and Jay. But it was sort of ironic because I get there in the summer of 1986. And then of course, President Reagan made the famous tear down the wall speech a year later. And then by the time I graduated, the Berlin Wall came down and it was the Francis Fukuyama end of history. And, those 4 years of Russian didn't seem so relevant anymore. And, the world had changed. But I was very much influenced just by the overall sort of sense of this kind of battle. And I thought the tech was really, really cool as well. And, ended up going into signals intelligence in the military and then ultimately made my way to NSA. But, if you go back to and you look at the influences on most people of our generation, I think a lot of people will track it back to this particular movie. So I love it.
And I understand it also is still influencing your fashion choices.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I brought some props. First of all, I brought my shall we play a game? I brought my to prove that I am actually a
oh my gosh,
Reagan person. And then of course, the big thing is, what my son's name is, right?
Joshua or Falcon?
It's Joshua.
Yeah, excellent.
So, it all works for me, man.
Boy, I don't know if you can top naming your son out of there, Fumez. What do you got? What do you got for us?
All I've got is a big thanks, first of all, for letting me be here. And I'm in NORAD, so maybe that's a one up. Greetings. We'll say I'm in Cheyenne Mountain, but I am in the headquarters for NORAD and U.S. Northern Command. And it's a great honor to be here. I totally agree with the way Jen framed that. I think back being in high school, watching the dial-up speed, which was lightning fast. And I said, I've got to be a techie and go to the Air Force Academy, far, far above that of the other service academies at 7,258 feet. But I will tell you, Cheyenne Mountain right down the road, I really wasn't tracking what Cheyenne Mountain was at the time, and having a chance to come back and now work in Cheyenne Mountain, be a part of NORAD and my previous director of operations and now at Northcom, safeguarding our homeland. But it all goes back to that technology piece. And I'm a techie. You mentioned I flew the advanced fighters, our frontline fighters. But really, when I had my Commodore 64 and my Mac 2E and trying to figure out how they worked, taking them apart, putting them back together, it all came back to that genre that we see in the latest technology, trying to do things faster and better. And it just motivated me my entire career. And again, it's great to be back here and have that sense to discuss how that movie really shaped us and all the situations that they experience. I know we'll talk more about the mountain and maybe a NORAD mission set later on, but it really kind of framed how I think through the technology and how that defends the the great nation we live in today.
Awesome. Thanks, Miss. Amelie. And we can't hear you,
I suffered my first Zoom sin here. So yeah, no, I'm probably one more to kind of empathize with Lightman, because you know, my first experience, you know, Fumez brought up about the Commodore 64. I had divorced parents and whatnot. So, you know, my unifying thing was I had a Timex Sinclair with my mom, which was like the cheap $100 one. And then I had a Commodore 64 when I go visit my dad. So, you know, it's like, you know, being an introvert and whatnot, that was always kind of the thing where I found myself. And then, you know, one of the first additions to my Commodore 64 besides a CPM cartridge was, you know, old VIC modem. So, you know, being able to yell at your parents for picking up the phone in the middle of a session was one of those early memories of mine as childhood. But, you know, when I was in junior high and high school itself, you know, I was doing war dialing, just, you know, I was a curious kid, you know, I had time on my hands and wanted information. My first chance to get on the internet was war dialing a local college. And instead of getting in the library, I got into the VAX system and got on to Go for Space and started to explore a little bit. So, you know, that, and, you know, now, you know, during the introduction, I'm now with the largest independent, you know, video game company now. So kind of comes full circle with the whole idea of searching for something entertaining and now actually getting to produce a lot of that. But, you know, it's always been kind of an interesting thing because, you know, being introduced of having a background there, just that the ability to kind of go look around at how technology has changed society as a whole, you know, from where it was just techies and curious kids to now every facet of society has some piece of technology involved in it. You know, I think of, you know, just the stuff that's sitting around my desk now. I got Wi-Fi, you know, conference lights that I can turn on and off. But, you know, before it was like, is this enough of a light bulb to kind of, you know, so I can see my computer screen type kind of stuff. So, you know, we've gotten to the point where it's almost a little excessive. And I almost think about those days back in '83 where it was a much simpler time where you only had to worry about, you know, massive mainframes and the military using this technology.
And it really comes in, you know, you're telling your story reminds me, I had a student, a computer science student that took one of our classes in the policy school, who grew up in the border region between in California and Mexico, and there was nothing to do. And to find anything, she had to go out on the internet and find games under any way that she could. And I was like, man, that is such a Lightman moment. That's exactly, you know, part of what he was trying to do. And Matt, what did this movie mean to you? And when did you first see it?
Yeah, so I grew up in a very rural area, so I didn't see it until it was on VHS, and it coincided around the same time I got my first computer, which was a Commodore 64, and I was obsessed with that thing. I think we have very similar stories. Amelie and I, divorced parents, you know, the computer was a great outlet for me with regards to creativity, but it was all coding. In fact, I did not even have a floppy drive to save my programs onto, and because of the winter storms, we would lose power frequently, and it would be very upsetting to lose the entire contents of everything I'd coded on that Commodore 64. But then I remember after seeing this movie, it was kind of like this aha moment. Now I needed to have a modem, and I wanted to connect into the bulletin board systems. And that inspired me to have my, you know, connectivity with other hackers out there and connect out of this rural area, again, over the unreliable phone lines. So it was a little sketchy, but it brought me into that community. So this movie really was my catalyst into that community. And of course, it inspired my career as well, because my focus in college and grad school was on cybersecurity, but then the link to national security. And my thesis was entitled National Security in the Information Age, one of the first kind of documents that wasn't classified by the US government to kind of look at the risks of our increasing dependence on information technology. And since I was a hacker, I knew that technology was inherently vulnerable. And I had this aha moment that said, okay, we're going to have a national security issue here. And then the full circle for me was my first job out of college was running a hacking team for the Department of Defense, where I got to go around to all of these facilities and actually got to go into Cheyenne Mountain and run a red team against the computers inside that facility, get the full tour. It looked nothing like it was in the movie, but I still had an incredible time doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And if I can say, right, Matt, you were in rural Vermont, right? Far, far north Vermont.
I was, yeah, way up in, we call it the Northeast Kingdom. So to put it in context, where my dad's house still lives there, they got their first internet connectivity and their first cell phone tower in 2020.
Oh my goodness. And it can be, it's hard to remember now because the internet seems like it is so full of hate and like it's splitting us apart, but it really was there originally to help connect us, right? And find people like Lightman does and like Matt does and others of saying, hey, there are others out there like me, in this case, hackers. Let's go, I'd like to go to the next clip really quickly because it's really, we only saw a little bit of Lightman hacking into the school. So maybe Lance, if we can go to the next clip here.
You're really into computers, huh?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Dialing into the school's computer.
Right, internet wasn't a thing, right? You had to dial in specifically to a particular
They change
place.
the password every couple of weeks, but I know where they write it down.
It even sounds like video game music here.
Are those your grades?
Yep. I don't think that I deserved an F. Do you?
You can't do that.
Already done. Do you have a middle initial?
K, Catherine. These are my grades.
How can anybody get a D in home ec?
If that's none of your business, can you erase this, please?
No, it's too late.
What are you doing?
I'm changing your biology grade.
No, I don't want you to do that. You're gonna get me in trouble.
No, nobody can find out. There, you just got a C. Now you don't have to go to summer school.
Change it back.
Why? They can't possibly just...
I said change it back.
Okay, okay.
And I really like that scene, especially because Ali Sheedy character is there, is the moral compass about what's right or wrong. I really enjoy that clip. It shows the technical bits as well as it shows some of the ethical issues that we go through. And Jen, I know that you've got to get back to dealing with the crisis. You might not be able to you won't be able to stay as long as you'd like. So if the other panelists don't mind, I'll go back to you again, Jen. So that was awfully easy to get into that school. Any comments on that? Do you think we're doing any better?
I think we're doing a little better.
Yeah, now it would be pencil one exclamation point. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the old writing down the 6-letter password on the inside the desk, people probably still are doing things like that. I mean, it goes to, I think, a fundamental issue, and we've certainly had these discussions before, and you know that at CISA, and it's really, you know, the vast majority of bad things that happen because of human error. You know, the old sort of more than 90% is human error, 93% of successful cyber attacks start with the phishing email. And so it kind of goes back to the point that the basics around cyber hygiene are really what we need to be promoting all across America who is not fundamentally familiar with technology. So it's one of the reasons why at CISA, we are really doing a big campaign this year, starting with all about cyber hygiene, starting with moving beyond the password to enable multi-factor authentication. So, you know, in the world I want to live in, there are no passwords, there are no pencils or whatever. And frankly, if they had multi-factor authentication, we would have avoided, you know, the prospect of thermonuclear war. So I think we still have those same challenges, Jay, but I think we now have a solution that we can move ourselves into if we have the will and desire to do it.
When you're talking about a world without passwords, I had John Lennon's Imagine going on in my head. Imagine a world with no passwords.
No, we're going to get Boston to do more than a password.
Excellent. Oh okay, well, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Matt and then Amelie, what do you What do you think? Did the hacking in that seem realistic? And you think are we doing better now?
Yeah, we're certainly doing better now. And I'm sorry, when she mentioned no more password, I thought of my voice as my passport. So, another hacker movie reference. Yeah, I mean, it is crazy kind of the difference in the attack surface and the sophistication of the networks. I mean, back then things were fairly wide open. And that was also the case within the Department of Defense. So I remember doing an assessment for Special Operations Command in 1996, I think it was. And the head of SOCOM had a 1-character password that he referred to as his combat ready password. So you can imagine 25 or 26-year-old Matt DeVoe trying to explain to this general why it was important not to have a 1-character password. Obviously, the complexity of the systems has increased over time. We've gotten much better at defending them, but we have to remember the attackers have gotten much more innovative as well. So we have to stay on our A game, and we have to keep improving our cyber defenses here over time.
By the way, Fuma, any passwords you want to share with us?
We've learned a lot from what Jen talked about. Sorry, Matt, no 1-character passwords at NORAD or Northcom from there. They've all been changed, and we are learning. I'll tell you, a spam filter would have helped back in the day as well. Might not even taken that call and avoided global thermonuclear war. But no, I will tell you from NORAD and Northcom, and really across the Department of Defense, everyone has really internalized to not be the person who is, who clicked on a link and spoiled the phishing attempt. And there's a little bit of pride there to not be the one, but more importantly, we're educating and understanding the linkage. And if you understand your vulnerabilities, you can put up those defenses, and then you can use the systems like they were designed to enable mission effectiveness overall. So, I think we might get into where does the human belong, on the loop, in the loop, just observing. But as you enter these systems, first of all, I did get a C at one point, and it was legitimate. I didn't change it to a C. But when you talk about mission effectiveness and overall that type of focus, this scene really kind of highlights the fact that there are always vulnerabilities in every system, but you have to know yourself, and you have to know what vulnerabilities there are so you can set up those defenses. And it really takes an entire team to do that, from CISA across DoD, but specifically for us at NORAD and Northcom, the reliance we have on those systems to be effective so we can do homeland defense is really important and critical. I will take, when we get rid of the passwords, that'll be amazing. But there'll always be a vulnerability with whatever next system comes. Yeah. So we have to know that and always be vigilant.
You don't want to be the soldier, sailor, airman, marine, or a guardian that makes the ooga thing go ooga, right? Amelie.
Yeah, my claim is having been on terminal systems like that, my thing with the movie is that screen refresh is way too fast. Being able to navigate around that TTY was just a little bit too much. Generally, I think just, it's great to kind of I know the whole thing with policy in the news and stuff that's pushing like zero trust, multi-factor authentication. When I was in college, the whole reason I actually ended up going the engineering route rather than getting to like consulting and stuff like a lot of my peers did was to learn the actual work that it took to kind of do that type of integration. And that's one of the things I always I'm usually a vendor's worst nightmare if you see me on site somewhere. And that's probably the reason I have this job right now, is that, a lot of the promises that, it's very easy to go do this, and this. But when you try to integrate all that in there, it's very difficult. And the kind of claims in the news, why isn't the government doing this in this amount of time? Or why doesn't this company have this? When you're actually, on the ground being an engineer or, somebody in the development or operations side of the house, it's actually pretty difficult because the environments are so diverse. And I think one of the challenges that, folks who are in computer security, just that curiosity, I think they make not only great IT people, but they're a great asset to, this kind of career space, because you're always kind of gaming I hate to say like the black swan, but the edge cases, and you're testing that. And those are sometimes, sometimes dismissed by leadership. But, often, as we've seen with the recent, hacks that have made the news over time, those edge cases have now kind of become reality. And I think part of that practice is to realize like, well, who's going to expect like a teenager to go and do this thing? Well, most likely it probably is a bored teenager, much like it was during the 80s, the 90s, or in the early 2000s. Now it's just that, a lot of these organizations have found these bored teenagers and have hired them for use in, APTs and other cybercrime syndicates. And now they're getting paid to have fun and be curious. So, those are one of the things that I always kind of found it was interesting, the transition from what we had, portrayed in the media back in the 80s versus the reality of things right now. So, that's why I was kind of found curious about it all.
Yeah, and if we can, John, before you have to go, right? I know that CISA has been involved in all sorts of storytelling, right? Different ways to get people to care about cybersecurity. And that's what DEFRAG is about, to get people to understand computer security, to get them understand hacking. As I had Matt say it to me once, all too often someone hands you technology and it's up to them how you use it. Like, it's not up to your choice about how you're going to use their technology. They try and dictate that technology. And the hacker is the one that say, I want to understand this, right? In a society that's increasingly technological, those that can understand and manipulate the technology at the base level, hackers, are the heroes and the anti-heroes. And so CISA has been out doing graphic novels. I know at your time in Morgan Stanley, you were kind of doing a Schoolhouse Rock for cyber. What movies or storytelling or games would you want to see to help get out the word on what cybersecurity is and how we can do better? How do we use narrative?
Yeah. I love this question, because I'm a little obsessed with storytelling. And I'm sorry I have to go a little bit early. I do want to first pick up on another question that I know you're going to ask, because I want to take the opportunity to talk about the folks that we are looking to bring into CISA, because I think folks know we are the newest agency in the federal government, a little bit over 3 years old, and we are on a hiring spree as we've gotten new budget, new authorities, and new responsibilities. So we are really evolving CISA to be not another lumbering government bureaucracy, but to be something that's much more like a public-private collaborative, much more similar to my world when I was at Morgan Stanley in our Cybersecurity Fusion Center. And so a lot of that is making sure that we have the right people, but it's also building a talent management system that allows us to attract and retain the right type of talent that we need. And so we're very, very focused on aptitude, but also attitude. So a lot of the, do you have the right cultural fit to be part of a team and be collaborative? Are you a problem solver? Are you intellectually curious? Are you a puzzler? I'm a bit obsessed with my Rubik's cubes. But, it's interesting when you look at Lightman and you look at Jennifer, it's actually, it's not just Lightman, right? It's almost like if you brought Lightman and Jennifer together, and you mentioned sort of the moral compass, I love motorcycles, so I like her little moped. He's a bit irreverent when it comes to authority. He's, intellectually curious. So I think it's sort of the two type of people coming together as, folks that we are looking to bring on. So I'm really excited. We've already started hiring some awesome people. So if folks are interested, I know we've got some students on here. You all should hit us up. And then on the question about storytelling, I think part of the challenge for technologists, and all of us here are technologists of sorts, is oftentimes we are challenged to be able to communicate well to non-technologists. And so often, I was talking earlier about how do you get your message across about enabling multi-factor authentication or like whatever zero trust, and we throw all these terms around. But I think there needs to be a real recognition that the way that we explain concepts needs to be as sort of simple as possible, as inspiring as possible, which is why I love the project I was working on at Morgan Stanley in Cyber Nation. So Cyber Schoolhouse Rock, short scripted films, documentaries. It was basically a multimedia platform to inspire and educate about, what does it mean to be a good digital citizen and all about cybersecurity. So The last story I'll tell, which is kind of one of my favorites, is when I was working with Keith Alexander and Chris Inglis and Paul Nakasone and TJ White to build Cyber Command. We were really trying to figure out, how do you tell the story so that you can get congressional approval and, explain this whole vision to people who are not technical. And so we created this whole thing called the Cyber Storyboard, and we got this graphic artist to create all these cartoons, and it was Paul and me briefing this, and it was super fun. We must have briefed it like 110 times, but it really helped explain what we were trying to do with building this new command and why the command had to be positioned with the cryptologic enterprise to leverage NSA's capabilities. And so really, if we didn't have that graphic artist really helping us tell those stories, I think that it would have been much harder to get approval for that command. So it was super fun. But I think if you combine technical skills, great culture, and storytelling capability, you have great success in cyber.
And that's what we're aiming for in this. And we had joked around in the prep of bringing together MFAs for MFA, Masters of Fine Arts for multi-factor authentication.
100%.
Let me go with the first question that you brought up to Fumez, and I'll ask a variant of it to Amelie and then Matt. Fumez, could Lightman or a Lightman Jennifer mix get hired into the Air Force today? And then the variant of the question I'm going to ask is to Amelie and Matt on the acceptance of hackers. Right, we've seen in the chat there's a great set of commentating going on, and are hackers still seen as, if you say that you're a hacker, are you still seen as you're this weirdo with the black hoodie and poorly understood, or is it being a little more accepted in society? Fumez, hackers in the Air Force?
Well, first of all, I would say I totally agree with Jen in the methodology that she's looking for talent, and I think that's the key piece we should focus on, is the talent that you bring. You need a diverse workforce, not only from the way you think about things, but what you can bring to the organization. And I would say the Air Force definitely is looking for that type of talent, and then trained on the mission sets, trained on the focus that we have within the Air Force. In my 32 years, I have seen a lot of different specialties, Air Force specialty codes change over time. I'm sure it's the same in the Army with the MOS, Jen, and all of our experiences are based on the environment that we're in. So we actually have to look at what the environment is bringing to us and challenging, and so we can make decisions using all the talents for the folks that are working on our systems. Because I was watching in the chat, someone who has an advanced degree, I did punch cards and Fortran back in the 90s, and hey, that's a skill set, but it may not be valid today because we have two-factor authentication. We have much faster systems that don't operate quite at that speed. But somebody has a special talent out there, and if we start to not appreciate what they can bring to an organization and find the right fit, our mission, and I use that word a lot because it really is a mission, and a mission takes an entire team. And if everybody is completely like-minded, you might be missing one avenue that could be that vulnerability that I talked to. So we really need to fan out. And I know General Brown, I've been watching, following him, our Chief of Staff of the Air Force, is really being very vocal on how we look and bringing all types of talent in. And especially today, as we try to recruit in all of our services and into the great agencies that we have represented, we need to go out and find those special talents and apply them to our values and our mission systems.
Check. Amelie and Matt on accepting of the hacker, and then when we're done with this, I'm going to turn it back to Lance Weiler to introduce to go back to the board.
Yeah. While things have changed, definitely, I think, especially within the federal government, but it's still obviously there's improvement that can be had. I know, especially when joining back in the 2010 timeframe. It was a lot of battle with OPM to understand that you needed a very diverse skill set and be a little bit more liberal about what you had to let people be able to do. I know definitely the DOJ and especially FBI have been looking at folks who may have had less severe criminal records to kind of go and hire, whether or not it be hacking related or drug use. Definitely as somebody who is, kind of on the Asperger's syndrome side of the house, it's just one of those cases that you have to understand how to work differently with with folks who are just basically neuroatypical in some cases, or, a lot of us go through a lot of interesting trauma. As I mentioned, I had divorced parents, so that has a little bit of kind of psychoanalyst aspect of how you deal with relationships and whatnot. And that puts people in an interesting space. And one of the reasons why some of us do what we do, like we're curious because we throw ourselves into a hobby or the work that we do. If you channel that, that's very useful, extremely useful. And I think that's part of the things both within the private and public sector that a lot of that stuff basically needs to change. Understanding that, definitely, the arguments that have been made in society and the culture as a whole about brain development as a youngster and where that kind of sits as they move into adults, to understand that curiosity or troublemaking as a young adult or even younger doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be should be branded for life. Obviously, as I kind of freely admitted, the kind of not necessarily what we refer to as the dark web kind of side of things now, but the idea of kind of potentially running afoul of what would be considered legal. Hasn't necessarily kept me from a career in the public space, but it's one of those cases of understanding that you can show your expertise and kind of help out where you can. I know there's a lot of people who, while they would love to get into public service and support government agencies, whether or not it be the DoD or the executive branch side of the house, don't because of past experiences or even ideology changes. And I think that's one of those things that's not easily overcome through either policy or law. It just kind of takes, and I think someone who's in the chat here about looking at people, what their hobbies are and what their interests are, what they can actually bring to the table, rather than just look at certificates or degrees or a clean background check. So that's going to be a big thing to overcome in the future.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that was really important. Jen, I think you wanted a two finger on that.
Just two finger on that. I mean, I think those are awesome points. Having started as a woman at West Point in one of our early classes, I spent a lot of time in my career not feeling like I look like anybody else and sort of, having to not be who I really was because I had to prove I was, as good as smart as fast as the guys that I was with. And so, we are really trying, I personally am trying very hard to make sure that what we're building in this new agency speaks to all of the things that you were saying, Amelie, in particular, neurodiverse, because at NSA, there's a lot of neurodiverse people and they happen to be pretty exceptional at the kind of things that we need to do to be good in this field, but all kinds of diversity. And I think we will not be successful if we're not able to cultivate that type of environment. And just the last point is we just put into play a new hiring system where it's all about aptitude. You don't have to have a degree. You don't have to have any certifications. Essentially, it's about taking a technical test and doing an interview. And so that's the direction that we're moving in, which I think is very game changing for being able to get the kind of talent that we need to be able to defend the nation.
Thank you for sharing that, Jen. Matt,
awesome.
You take over and then we'll go to Lance.
Excellent. Well, I'm anxious to get to Lance's Miro board because they're a work of art in of themselves in the past when I've participated in them. So looking forward to this one. I feel like it definitely has gotten easy. I mean, at the start of my career, I really had this interesting juxtaposition of being a hacker and having a security clearance. And I can remember in 1996 going to a hacker conference and worrying about losing my security clearance for being there. So there's been definitely a much higher level of acceptance. I also remember in the private sector, after the Solar Sunrise attacks, there was a video that was put out, I think it was NIPC that put it out, reviewing what had happened. And they had an interview with an IBM executive, and he says, I would never hire a hacker. And I remember being inflamed by that, because like, I was a hacker. I had worked on solving Solar Sunrise. I was there at DISA doing the investigation, had gotten called in from Florida. So luckily, I feel like, from a hacker community perspective, we've won and are winning. And the embracing the curiosity, the diversity of the community really is starting to triumph. And you have leaders like Jen that are changing the workforce structure and the admittance into critical agencies so that we can address some of these issues of getting hackers into the workforce. But I think it is a problem that is, resolved itself really well over the past 25 years based on my early experiences, but still with some work to do. And oh, by the way, IBM ended up buying a team of hackers. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Great. And with that, let me remind you again, please pop your questions into the Q&A. I'm more likely to be asking live the questions that are related to the movies. But we'll try, we the panelists and I, so we'll try and get in and answer by text some of the other ones. Director Eastley, thank you for your time. I suspect you're going to have to drop.
Yeah, great to be with everybody. Thanks so much.
And with that, I want to do the game show swoosh of my hands to say we're going over to Lance right now.
Thanks, Jay, for that. What we're going to be doing here is we're going to be stepping into a board that we've created. And just really quickly, you'll see here that there's a whole space that we're going to be exploring. And just really quickly, what I want to make note of is that you'll want to keep in mind two different things. If you remember, I talked about how you can zoom in and out. If you find yourself just moving side to side, go up to this gear that's up towards the top here and just click on it and go to preferences and determine whether you're a mouse or trackpad, okay? And then if you experience kind of a thing when all the cursors are on there, there's a way to optimize it if you experience lag. Just go up next to the party kind of horn and click to show or hide collaborators' cursors. So we're going to give you probably a couple minutes here. We'll drop a timer into the board, but you can go and explore anything that you want and immerse yourself in the world of WarGames. So at this point, we're going to drop into the chat a link for you. It's a Miro link, and it will launch this board that you see in front of you right now. And you'll be doing this in a browser window, and then we'll bring you back over to Zoom. We'll let you know when the sound goes off, when the alarm goes off, we'll return to the conversation. But for right now, we're going to take a couple moments or minutes and let you kind of just explore this world of WarGames. So with that, we're dropping into the chat now a link for this board. So you'll be able to start to see folks kind of make their way in. And so with that, just enjoy. We'll let you know when to return. And Jay and team, if you feel free, if you want to talk at all, you're more than welcome to, or you can explore the board too.
Thank you, Lance.
So to drop some trivia in, I guess, more than anything, since we have some dead air. So for folks who actually end up liking this film, the writer for this film was also the same one who wrote Sneakers. So anybody who may have been a little bit later into the game by 9 years, definitely there is a kind of a carry-on. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the sequel to WarGames, which was, I think, in 2011, which was a direct-to-video. I did read the synopsis on it and was definitely not inspiring. But you know, I think, you know, much like Tron was due a sequel, I think there was a need to have this kind of updated for this day and age.
For like two and a half minutes.
Lance, will the board still be accessible for folks after the event if they want to come explore further?
Yes, Matt, the board will be accessible for folks after the event.
It's amazing to be seeing the board and seeing the cursors go everywhere.
From NARAD, we have to make sure this is an unclassified backdrop here, so I'll get back with you.
General, DBS is tracking 300 inbound Soviet ICBMs.
Tell me this is one of your simulations, Mr. Jack. All right. Flush the bombers, get the subs in launch mode. We are at DEFCON 1.
DEFCON 1?
We're in. It thinks I'm Falcon. Hello.
How can it ask you that?
It'll ask you whatever it's programmed to ask you. You want to hear it talk?
Yeah.
I'll ask it how it feels. I'm fine. How are you?
Excellent. It's been a long time. Can you explain the removal of your user account on June 23rd, 1973?
They must have told it he died. People sometimes make mistakes.
Yes, they do.
How can it talk?
It's not a real voice. This box just interprets signals from the computer and turns them into sound.
Shall we play a game?
See, I told you those are always so cool.
Yeah, there's so much to explore there. And Lance, I think we take the board that you and Taki did, and we raise money for future DEFRAG events by selling the NFT on that. And I don't think I'm kidding, actually, but I might be. And so I popped into the chat, Fumez, that like I had done NORAD missions. I had been up at Elmendorf Air Force Base. We had this in Alaska. We had this big 40-acre antenna, and I know Cobra Dane, right? It was a big radar. And so in the clip, they say, we're talking about Cobra Dane. I was like, hey, that sounded realistic. But that was just one little detail, right? I mean, I just saw like Matt, right? We kind of got, introduced like to the thinnest slice of NORAD. So in the first section of this, we talked about what part of the hacking seemed realistic. I've always wanted to ask someone with your background that flew NORAD missions as an F-15 pilot, that was there as what the deputy J3 and now the J3 for both NORAD and Northern Command. Like, what seemed realistic? Do y'all hate this movie? Like, oh God, don't, like on dates, you don't bring up that you work at NORAD because you're afraid someone's gonna go, ooga, ooga. Like, what do you think about when you see this movie?
First of all, I love it. And before working in the mountain, before being in NORAD, and now on the NORTHCOM side of the two commands, it's pretty real. You see the blast doors, and I always think, in the mountain, what should it look like? I love some of the backdrops I see here on the screen, and that's really what it's all about, is displaying information and taking that information. And if you have more information than your competitor or someone else who could be potentially shooting at you, you can make decisions faster. And that's the part that I was really intrigued by as I watched the movie again and again over the years. And I do own it. It is one of my favorite movies. So I'm really excited to talk about that. But early on, you put yourself into looking at the big board, as they call it. And I think, Matt, you mentioned, hey, it looked a little bit different. We took you into a special room, I think, in the corner there based on your credentials. But no, they do get it right with a lot of things. People are there 24/7. Back in the day, now we use it as an alternate command center, but we still exercise out of there. We still run the missions out of Cheyenne Mountain. And for NORAD, we think about what the missions are: aerospace warning, assimilating all the details and information from whether it's satellites, terrestrial sensors, the Cobra Dane that you talked about, to do missile warning. NORTHCOM does the missile defense mission from there. But it's pretty neat, the similarities when you get into a scene. It looks like another military command center. There's a bunch of people, everyone has a station, they know exactly what to do. Information comes in. I will change my ringtone to the horn that goes off that tells you there's a missile event going on. And it really kind of brings it to life, and I like the point in the movie to make it visually spectacular. And that's the thing, it's not only entertainment, but it's putting you in the mode and in the scene. And when you see that, like, I love the Miro board because I'm getting flashbacks in every corner that I go to, because I think about the mission I do for my job, and I think about how I'm connected to not only the entertaining piece, but it's challenging my mind to think through how I would take that piece of information and make a decision. And I know, if you look at NORTHCOM and NORAD mission sets, it's all about having information, understanding how to react faster than whether it's an adversary or a competitor, and making that decision faster. And I know that's where the movie really puts you in that mode and in that scene. So from flying a jet, sitting on a console, or being the senior decision maker and assimilating that information, it's just really exciting.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. And it's really funny in this interaction between Hollywood and the military, right? In this movie, they created what they thought would, like, NORAD ought to look like super cool and advanced. That was cooler than it was at the time. But then General Alexander, who, it's too bad Jen's not here, whom she worked for as a colonel, actually beforehand, when he was at Army Intelligence, down at Fort Belvoir, this is, call it 2002, Virginia, he brought in the people from Hollywood, from Disney, Paramount, to set up his command center so that it would look like the freaking Starship Enterprise, right? He did it in reverse. Like, he had this like Captain Kirk chair in the center of his command based on what Hollywood thought it ought to look like. And I think it was like that until relatively recently. So I always think about that when I see General Nakasone now up and showing the US Cyber Command there. All right. I think let's, Lance, if maybe we bring up the next clip or be ready. I'm gonna do an intro here because it really hit me. One of the questions that we got in the Q&A was talking about the Whopper and you know what it's doing. It's doing war games and always thinking about and so automation features heavily in this movie, as well as the movie that we saw earlier with Ron in an earlier event that we held for DEFRAG, which featured Chris Painter and Ron Gula and others, and that was Chris Painter's favorite movie, Colossus: The Forbidden Project. I mean, even automation even features really in Dr. Strangelove, where the military is relying on computers to handle the hard work of national defense. And like, there's real truth here, right? The Soviets, and some of you might see this on the board, had the Ryan system, which was there to be like calculating all the factors that might indicate nuclear war was coming. They had a dead hand system, which was like out of Dr. Strangelove, like if they got nuked, that the missiles would still launch at the end of the day. And network computing was essentially invented for North American air defense with the SAGE system back in the 50s. Now, Fumez, your boss, General Van Herk, has said, you know, he's been pitching NORAD's global information dominance experiments to demonstrate how you can use intelligence, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So with that as the intro, Lance and team, if you can bring up the next clip, please.
These computers give us instant access to the state of the world, troop movements, Soviet missile tests, shifting weather patterns. It all flows into this room and then into what we call the Whopper computer.
Whopper, what is that?
It's the War Operation Plan Response. This is Mr. Richter. Paul, would you like to tell these gentlemen about the Whopper?
Well, the Whopper spends all its time thinking about World War III. 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, it plays an endless series of war games using all available information on the state of the world. The Whopper has already fought World War III as a game, time and time again. It estimates Soviet responses to our responses to their responses, and so on. Estimates damage, counts the dead, then it looks for ways to improve its score.
But the point is that the key decisions of every conceivable option in a nuclear crisis have already been made by the Whopper.
So what you're telling me is that all this trillion-dollar hardware is really at the mercy of those men with the little brass keys.
That's exactly right. Whose only problem is that they're human beings. But in, 30 days, we could replace them with electronic relays. Get the men out of the loop.
Gentlemen, I wouldn't trust this overgrown pile of microchips any further than I could throw it. And I don't know if you want to trust the safety of our country to some silicone diode.
General, nobody is talking about entrusting the safety of the nation to a machine, for God's sake. We'll keep control, but we'll keep it here at the top where it belongs.
All right, gentlemen. I think I'm going to recommend McKittrick's idea to the president, and I'll get back to you on this.
I really like that clip. There's so much to unpack in that clip, and I really liked Benjamin's question about this. Is the Whopper real? If so, how much trust would you put into these simulations, and how much human touch should we add? Where do we find the balance? And so Fumez, right, Whopper was a particular kind of AI, if you will, or automation, right? It was doing simulations, and it was only later that they gave control. It was for understanding. The Soviet Ryan system was assessing existing geopolitical factors to assess if war was more likely. It was a prediction system. It was meant to be warning, not operational control or analysis. So as your boss, General Van Herk, who in this case, I guess would have been General Berenger, when he's talking about using AI, what does that mean? Help us understand what that means.
I think we all aspire to artificial intelligence that will help us, not fight against us. And it's really, I think it brings up a very key question of where should the human be in decision making. That's why we have humans in the loop. in a lot of decisions. And there's certain tasks that we should automate. And we've seen a lot of that now, whether it's in the industrial function of automation. But when we think about decision making, General Van Herk has really guided us to three main priorities. One is a domain awareness, where we kind of sense what's out there. And if you can see it, you can make a decision against it. The next piece is information dominance. And I think that one of the things the Whopper brings into the sense is it's running a scenario over and over and over, and it's bringing that information in, and it's doing some calculations and spitting out a result. And that's what here at NORAD and NORTHCOM, we call decision superiority. And if you blend those three together, you have awareness of the environment, whether you're under attack, whether you're sensing something through the air or something through coming over land or under sea. You start to build a perspective of what the environment looks like. But it's that data that turns to information that enables decision, which is really what the Whopper was trying to get at. Hey, I can replace all the humans and I can do this myself. I can figure out what the best move would be. And that decision superiority, and my question back at you of where the human should be, I think it depends on what function you're doing. There's clearly ethical, maybe some legal decisions that need to be made. Those are probably best made for the human. But if you can back the human further out to exactly where you're monitoring, I think that's the value in using artificial intelligence, advanced data analytics, and then maybe refining algorithms to help you decide even faster. And that was really where the movie kind of puts you in there. Not can you win or not win, but how can you make a decision faster? And that's really where we're trying to drive in our global information dominance experiment. All live information, assimilating it to what a picture looks like, and then training on it over and over to figure out where that intelligence, that artificial intelligence that's learning from the environment by being able to sense, will enable you to make decisions faster. Because I think we can all say it's like when you're driving down the road and you have your travel app and it's telling you where a hazard is or something, you're making decisions with live information. But if someone has a better app or faster, they may find a better, faster route. That's really what that decision superiority is all about. We all share the same information, but if I can use it better and faster, I'm going to have the advantage.
Okay, cool. But what about, and I'm curious, and I know you're not going to share intelligence, but I mean, one of the issues with Soviet Ryan was we didn't necessarily know that they had it at the time. And, according to one telling of the story, based on the correlation that it was seeing, was part of the reasons that the Soviets might have thought that the Able Archer exercise in 1983 was an actual NATO preparation for war. And so I'm just curious on not just like how concerned ought we be. So if we say, okay, good, we know that NORAD is using this correctly, but boy, what if China or Russia aren't, and they don't have the same view of having the human in the loop and being there for decision. But heck, the Russians had a dead hand system, for gosh sakes.
Yeah, well, I think it comes down to what's the objective and intent. If you're actually in an exchange from there, making a decision faster, clearly buys you the advantage. But it really comes down to when you look at the missions. Here at NORAD and NORTHCOM, we look at homeland defense. Credible, capable defensive posture buys quite a bit of deterrence. And then with all those different capabilities that we have as a nation, how we make decisions with that as the information comes in shows that we are very credible and capable with our defense. To the other side, and I think maybe we need to give the environment credit. We all know that machines help us get information, whether it's intelligence gathering, but it's how we use that information in parity against each other to make a faster decision. And I think what you're really getting at is how do we trust in the order as we look at competitors, in the current situations that we're in. And that really goes into open communication, maybe some dialogue, but you're backed up by having a credible deterrent because you have credible capabilities on your side.
Yep. And I do want to invite for people I think the board is still open. There's a whole automation area that has some of these. Matt and Amelie, if I can turn to you next, and one either just reactions to Fumez's thoughts there, or one of the issues that I've been curious about for a couple of years is we know that as cyber defenders that we need to automate. And it's bugged me a little bit because I know we have to do it, but I feel like a lot of the real evangelists for cyber AI make it sound like if we do this, then we're done, right? If we do this, then we'll be in a better shape. But I'm afraid that the AI is going to help the cyber attackers way more than it's going to help us as defenders. And so just curious, Matt, your thoughts again, either on war fighting and automation to Fumez's point, or to pick up on my question.
Yeah, I think it's too early to tell, who it's going to better enable. I do remember sitting at the DARPA Cyber Grand Challenge at DEF CON and thinking that I was living in a future, based on the capability demonstrated that was 5 to 10 years ahead of time. So that kind of automated cyber attack and defend, I think, is inevitable. And the attacks are going to come at machine speed, and the defense is going to need to come at machine speed. I think one obstacle that we will have on the defense side is that as we try to enable AI to support us or make decisions, we hopefully will be giving it careful consideration to make it secure, right? To make sure that the training data that we're using is not corrupt, to make sure that there's some algorithmic integrity to it, that the infrastructure that we're running it on is secure. The adversaries likely won't have those concerns. We have the potential for them to release stuff into the wild that is far more impactful than we can defend against. So that is kind of my big concern with the automated attack versus automated defense, is that we'll operate with many more constraints on the defense side, just because that's the resilient thing to do, whereas the attackers won't have those constraints and might leap ahead in that regard.
Yep, Amelie?
Zooms in number 3. So yeah, this is great to think that computers attacking computers, but as a former line defender and whatnot, and especially when I was doing stuff at the Defense Cybercrime Center, there are people behind this. So it's great to basically think that you've got a script kiddie or you've got automated attacks and stuff going on, but there's usually always a human being behind it. My degree, I originally went in for computer engineering because I wanted to do the technical stuff, but I actually came out with a decision science degree. Much about what we use computers for nowadays should be for decision support, not decision making, but decision support. There's, as much as we want to remove the human emotion and fallibility in the decision-making process and reactivity, because we're emotional, from a reaction, much what we've seen with Terminator, the Terminator series of movies, and as many other science fiction movies you want to have, including this one that we're talking about. The ability to pause, understand the ethics of things. Those are things that are still somewhat lacking from AI. AI is fallible because it is programmed by humans. Our data sets, I think Matt Ferguson brought in about that, is, the stuff I was doing at Splunk was, a lot of those decisions are made, do you know if the data set is complete? Is it trustable? Is it hasn't been poisoned? Again, too, also the bias of AI, a lot of those are programmed by, I hate to bring in some of the politics in here, but white cis males, and don't encounter people who are of minority, gender minority, racial minority, ethnic or cultural minorities. So the nuances that are involved in those decision-making processes usually aren't brought to the table. So to touch on like what Jen talked about by getting a diverse workforce in place, a lot of that also assists in creating those nuanced decisions about how to act, having that ground truth. The talk what Fumez was talking about is like, one of my jobs in high school, and I think I've had this in the chat a little bit before, I was a pizza delivery driver. So I learned the town I was delivering, the layout, the shortcuts, ways to get around certain dangerous areas at certain times of the day. That's your human intelligence you get from that ground truth of being there, experiential stuff that you may not get from sensor networks or from, just straight data pulls. Where it came into play was I visited Ocean City during the 4th of July a number of years ago, and I'm sitting in the car with my spouse stuck in traffic, and I see a pizza delivery car 2 blocks down just hopping through the back streets, and I'm like, from my knowledge as a pizza delivery person, I'm going to get off this main street and follow them because I know they know how to get around this. And that is the same thing with attackers, is that, you know, as much as you're going to just basically follow the flow, you know, you can look through some of that noise and find that small signal that will basically lead you into, you know, the potential threat that may be on there. One of the things that I talked about, you know, during my Darknet Diaries episode was the fact that we missed the smallest signal, which was an AV log entry of where the attacker had basically tried an exploit and then pivoted, and then it wasn't picked up by our AV systems. But if we had triggered on that small signal, we would have been able to respond and be more proactive. And because of the volume, because of the automation, that a lot of that artisanal attacking sometimes is lost in the noise of all this data, we don't necessarily kind of see the actual TTPs, the tactics, techniques, and procedures of our attackers, because it's just the volume and we rely on a lot of machine processing. So I don't think humans will ever be removed from this. It's a matter of basically applying them in the most advantageous methods. And then it also goes back, I think, to talking to people about, like, you know, how do you hire smart people? I want to put them in front of a decision scenario such as this, and basically, what would you do? Would you rely on the computing system, or would you do it based on data you've gotten from elsewhere?
Yeah, and let me pick up, because I was going to move on to the next question, but Evan Wolf had a great question, my teaching colleague here at CIPA. You know, here they were looking at connecting Whopper to, you know, first it was running simulations, and then they were giving it control. And so he asked, does it matter if Whopper controls utility systems or banks? And right, and that's been in a lot of movie plot lines, he notes. But like, how do you as panelists think about the automation of critical infrastructure, right? I mean, you know, put in mind not necessarily AI in this necessarily, but also industrial control systems, cyber physical, the Internet of Things.
There is a tremendous amount of automation right now, right? I mean, in financial systems, look at Renaissance or some of the quant-based entities that are using deep machine learning and enabling the computers to trade for them automatically. Same in critical infrastructure, right? Because there are decisions that need to be made around allocation of resources that need to be made faster than a human being can make them. So there's certainly, within constraints, a high level of automation that exists in some of those systems as well.
Yeah, I would say too is, you know, when I was working at a power company, one of the things that gave us the greatest advantage was actually modeling our business processes, knowing what we expected to come from certain networks, and basically, you know, doing some of those first anomaly detection aspects. So modeling what is normal behavior assists in creating those heuristic models. You find those the outliers and whatnot. I've always thought as AI as more or less as assisted intelligence, not actually artificial. You know, I was in the channel here talking about how Whopper reminded me of, you know, the parallel computing lab at my university, where it was all the lights were blinky and stuff like that. But I knew, you know, as Matt mentioned, there is the desire to move faster than the human brain. As much as we think that, you know, wire speed is fast, the fact that a human brain can parallel process faster than anything we have in silicon now, even the quantum computing, still is massive leaps both in efficiency and compute power that we have available to just anybody nowadays. You know, as much as we think of, you know, everyone makes the analogy about the phone in your pocket is more powerful than the computers that were used to land on the moon. You know, until we get honest to goodness thinking machines, regardless of Siri calling back home, we're not to a stage right now where we can honestly trust those responses. I posted some stuff to Twitter about asking Google as to what the weather was, and literally showing snow outside my window, and Google was basically like, yeah, it's sunny and fine out. So, you know, sometimes you just can't do that.
Yeah, and it's people are always amazing as we're learning from the amazing questions that we're getting and the amazing chat. Fumez, I'm going to go to you for a second, because as we were talking about the AI and the automation, right? What they were going to go to the president on was saying, take the humans out of the loop. Now, I know you're a fighter pilot. You didn't come up on the strategic command on the SAC side, on the missile silos, and that's where the movie starts, right? In the missile silos. I don't think we need to show that clip. To your understanding, is it so we're looking right now, the United States is looking to modernize its nuclear force, right? Modernize all three elements of the triad. And a lot of us were kind of happy that so much of the ICBM still used these huge 8-inch floppy disks, because it was so not pre-digital, but I mean, it was kind of like vacuum tube kind of digital. How are we advancing right that is life in those silos, from what you understand, still, you know, the missileers with the keys, and are we going to keep it that way with it still being the missileers with the keys?
I'll defer to a strategic command to really talk through the triad and how.
Can you get them on the phone? Can you?
Yeah, it's right back there behind me. Just a quick comment on on the other part. If you have something that is so significant to your operation, your financial activity, your power grid, et cetera, you're clearly going to protect that even more. And you kind of prioritize where you think you would protect. And I think we always say, if you're playing hockey and there's a soccer goal behind you, I think you'd rather be playing soccer with a hockey goal behind you. Try to minimize that threat access and vulnerability. And I think that kind of goes along the lines of when we talk about these incredible systems that we have. And as you talk through the triad again, I defer to what that's going to look like in the future. However, we know as we modernize, we keep safeguards and we get better at the defense in addition to our offensive capabilities. And that offensive capability clearly is our foundation, that nuclear deterrent, as I was talking to before. But I think it really comes back to how much do we value that system, and we definitely have to invest further and further in the cybersecurity, and then in the reliance on artificial intelligence or near artificial intelligence, clearly keeping a human in the loop in some of those critical decisions, but enabling them to have the best information to make the decision is really the target that I would offer as we develop and modernize.
Great, thanks. And Lance, we can get ready for that next clip, but give me a moment, because I wanted to note a couple of things. One, as people can explore on the board, I meant to bring this up when we were talking about the impact of Hollywood on our field and our field on Hollywood. Ronald Reagan did watch this movie. I had first heard this brought up by the NSA and Cyber Command historian, a guy named Michael Warner, who raised that Reagan watched it with friends and was shaken by it, right? He really was shaken by the thought of nuclear war and was not a fan of nuclear weapons as much as he pushed that. He went to General Vesey, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and said, is that realistic? Could this happen? Or was this just Hollywood? General Vesey says, what generals say when you don't know, sir? Let me get back to you on that. General Vesey comes back a couple of days later and apparently says, sir, it's not only accurate, it is apparently worse than the movie might have depicted. Michael Warner has written about that. It's also in Fred Kaplan's history book. And that led to the very first presidential cybersecurity policy for national security systems that just recently got updated. That the first one was NSDD 145. Also, I want to point out that Lily had mentioned in the Q&A that the locks, not the launch code, which was quite complex, but there was a physical lock on the weapons themselves. Fumez, you know where I'm going with this. Do you want to tell the story?
No, you're doing just fine. Got to have a better password. That's the moral of the story.
Politicians wanted to make sure the weapons were only used if they wanted them used. So they wanted these things to be locked. The nuclear warfighters wanted to make sure they were always ready, and that they could be used whenever needed. It's called the never always trade-off. And so they said, yes, sir, we will put on those locks. I think it was Kennedy, the Kennedy White House that asked for them, but they set all the locks to all zeros. I think it was 6 or 8 zeros, so that they could not tell the president they had put them in. All right, and with that, Let us, okay, so in the movie, General Berenger, who I guess is representing your boss, Fumes, right? He's representing General Van Herk. Right, he's rushed in his decision making. I guess the time, how long do you have normally for an ICBM, General Hike? 20 minutes?
I would say, yeah, not very long.
Yeah. But
in the big scheme of things.
Yeah, you've got something like 20 minutes, right? They've got some time to figure that to figure this out. Lance, if we can go run the next clip, please.
I don't know what you think you could do here, Stephen.
John, good to see you. I see the wife still picks your ties.
What has this kid been telling you?
How far's it gone?
The president's about ready to order a counterstrike. That's what we're recommending you do.
It's a bluff, John. Call it off.
No, it's not a bluff. It's real.
Hello, General Berenger. Stephen Falcon.
Mr. Falcon, you picked a hell of a day for a visit.
General, what you see on these screens up here is a fantasy, a computer-enhanced hallucination. Those blips are not real missiles, they're phantoms.
Jack, there's nothing to indicate a simulation at all. Everything's working perfectly.
But does it make any sense?
Does what make any sense?
That.
Look, I don't have time for a conversation right now.
General, are you prepared to destroy the enemy?
You betcha.
Do you think they know that?
I believe we've made that clear enough.
Then don't. Tell the president to ride out the attack.
Sir,
I love the unbuttoned jacket.
General,
how you know he's in distress.
Do you really believe that the enemy would attack without provocation, using so many missiles, bombers, and subs, so that we would have no choice but to totally annihilate them?
1 minute and 30 seconds to impact.
General, you are listening to a machine. Do the world a favor and don't act like one.
1 minute and 20 seconds to impact.
Yes, Mr. President.
1 minute and 10 seconds.
Sir, at this point in time, we cannot positively confirm the inbounds. We have reason to believe they may not exist. Yes, sir, that's affirmative. Yes, sir. I do too.
1 minute to impact.
Such a good quote there. So Fumes, to bounce back to you, right? I mean, the technologies we're talking about now, like hypersonics, might be, Emily, stop making me laugh while I'm trying to ask a question. Can drive those times down even shorter, right? I mean, having 20 minutes might seem like it's like forever compared to shorter times. And some have proposed that cyber might be able to do the same. So how are you and your colleagues? How do you think about those, those potentially decreased warning times?
Yeah, first of all, it's fascinating. This movie was made, quite a few years ago, 3 decades ago or so, and it's almost the same concept today, but the time horizon may be different. You mentioned hypersonics, and clearly with the advent of faster weapons or weapons that are evading detection or designed to evade detection, shrinks that decision space overall. What I really liked was the pause and the discussion about, do we trust the data? Do we trust the information? And I think that comes from a couple of things. One is training. If you run these scenarios over and over, you learn to trust or potentially not trust information. But over time, when you get reliance of the systems that run over and over, that'll go into the decision calculus and the way the general portrayed it, talking to a senior leader. There's always that calculus of what are you making your decision on? And I think that's a great theme that we continually carry when we do our training, when we talk about the type of warning. And as we look at the speed of an inbound threat, the further left we can get with awareness and warning, the much faster we can make a decision and then be effective. And then we call that getting left of launch. If we could know before it happens, we could make a decision much faster and potentially either outwit or be able to set up a defense or make a decision much faster.
Yep. And let me, Lance, are you there? If you can maybe pick it back up and maybe talk a little bit about more about the board. And then maybe after that, we'll do a quick spotlight to Bo Woods to talk about some of our upcoming events. And then we'll come back into the panel for the final questions.
More than happy to. So we reset the board. For anybody that would like to go back and kind of look, it's the same link. And Vera, if you could drop it in again, that would be great. And some of the things that we were trying to do with this board, and what I think is interesting about the use of something like Miro, is it's an infinite canvas. And so we can have concurrent users in here moving at the same time, moving together within the space and exploring. And some of the work that we do at the lab is really about this idea of new forms and functions of storytelling, you know, kind of looking at the idea of how forms might be something like artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, virtual reality, you know, augmented reality, and then the functions being like this idea of learning, healing, mobilization, policy change using storytelling. So when we had a chance to kind of collaborate in and around DEFRAG, it felt like it would be interesting to kind of create a board that would allow us to kind of immerse ourselves in some of the world of WarGames, to be able to move through it and know that everybody else is kind of moving through it concurrently. With the actual the link, which I believe Veer has dropped into the chat again, you'll be able to kind of freely move through the board and check out some of the other stuff that maybe you didn't have a chance to. And we'll give that probably about 2 minutes of time, and then we'll kind of come back. Miro is free for an education license, so you can pick it up and you can experiment with it. We use it often in terms of design process and allowing us to document over the course of a semester, the learnings that we're doing in the classroom. And we often use it for exploratory and experimental kind of storytelling, collaborative storytelling. We like to say that we take a productivity tool and we subvert it and turn it into a collaborative storytelling tool, right? And so we do that a lot through the use of the arts and just kind of looking at that. I think, you know, for me personally, what's so exciting about WarGames is there's high stakes in it, but there's really these very dynamic characters that are at the core of it. And I think as you kind of immerse yourself in that world, it feels very believable and I think very relevant, even though it's almost 40 years old, you know. So it's a wonderful achievement. So we wanted to just try to bring some of that cinematic notion or opportunity into what we were doing in the board, and trying to find a way that we are kind of now in this really interesting paradigm where stories are not just solely something where it's one to many, they're many to many. And I think that you see this a lot with how narratives are shaped in our culture. And we had done another really interesting project in conjunction with the Brown Institute for Media Innovation, which was kind of predicated on, it was called Project Immerse. And basically you would find yourself in this experience where there was these data dumps and you weren't sure who dumped the data to you and what the purpose was. And you worked with other people to make sense of it. It was kind of all about apathenia and how stories are shaped. And it was this really interesting way to use a Miro board where groups of people would make sense of what they came across. And then we would use it in ways that we would have kind of like a discursive artifact. Afterwards, we would have very dynamic conversations about, in that case, about trust and deception in the age of machines. And so this felt like a good jumping off point for tonight in terms of just creating an interface that almost made you feel like you were in NORAD, almost made you feel like you were immersed in. I don't know if anybody ever played the old 8-bit Atari game. I have it as my background here. Wanted to try to evoke that within this experience. So that's just a little bit more about the Miro board. Jay, we can let folks roam through it. I can play some music from the film if you want, or if you want to continue to talk.
Yeah, why don't we have Bo, let's spotlight Bo if Bo's ready, and hear some of the upcoming DEFRAG events that we've got planned for the year.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. I really enjoyed this conversation and playing with the Miro board. I'm probably going to go back after the event and tweak it some more. It's pretty cool. As Jay mentioned, we've done a number of past events. This is, I think, our biggest DEFRAG event to date, but it's not the first. We've done some cool watch parties where we basically live streamed a movie and watched it with a peanut gallery. We've done some Twitter live events. We've done quite a bit of other cool stuff. So if you dug this and you want to do some more stuff, follow us on at Columbia DEFRAG on Twitter. And you can sign up for our mailing list on the website, and we'll let you know when something's upcoming. We do have also a documentary film, a very short film that we're getting ready to release probably in the next little bit here. I don't know the exact timeline for it. But it's recorded from a bunch of hackers, policymakers, business leaders talking about the experience of filmmaking, perception of hackers in film, and why we need to try and bridge that gap a little bit. So we had a ton of fun making that, and we think you're going to have a lot of fun watching it as well. And we'll probably do an event coming up here soon. And also, we're working with some hacker conferences and some film festivals and some other places to try and show up there and kind of bring what we're doing on a road show, so that you don't have to, sit at home and watch it. You can do it live and in person. We're hoping that once everything opens back up, we can do one in New York, and we've got a venue picked out for that. But we want to team up with some other places and kind of go to the places where filmmakers work, where business leaders work, where hackers are, and engage with them and kind of bring everybody together, bring these 2, 3, 4 communities that we're talking about, and really fuse them so that we have a lot more benefit, a lot more demystifying of what goes on behind the scenes in the various different walks of life. So really excited for the future and look forward to seeing you all at another event.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Our colleague, Bo Woods. And so, now maybe we can pull up, Lance, we can be ready with the next clip, and I think we'll go to sneakers. So I want to go back to, so we talked a little bit about realism in the David Lightman scene, but I'd like to show another clip, and I hope everyone's going to go with it. It's not a WarGames clip, but it's just it's a pretty beloved movie from 1992. And let's go with the next clip, Lance, please.
Yeah, just give me a moment, Jay, and I'll pull it up.
Yep. And so, yeah, this is one of very beloved, and for me, it probably had more early influence than WarGames for me personally, just because that's because it really caught the cultural moment, right? I think in '83, I still did not see myself as a technologist or someone that was adept at that. But by 1992, I was getting into that position, and I realized that this might be, that this was going to be a place for me. And so, Matt, you had made an earlier joke about, yeah, we got a lot of joking, we got a lot of stuff going on in the chat, and you had brought up something about my voice is my passport with Jen.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of a scene within the movie where they have voice authentication to get into that corporate facility. And of course, one of the characters, I can't remember her name now off the top of my head, is social engineering her date to try and say all of the words that are used for that passphrase, which is my voice is my passport. Please verify me. To the point where she tells him, what I think is a really sexy word is the word passport, and it's passport. So it makes for a very funny clip when they're trying to play it back, because it's the cut and paste version of that phrase, vice the kind of the natural language articulation of it.
Yep. Okay, let's go to this first clip here.
You wouldn't believe what I had to go through just to get a safe deposit box.
To me, this is every incident responder everywhere. Something goes bad and you grab your notebook. It's your checklist to figure out what you're supposed to do.
What's in the playbook?
Oh, shit. We're getting too old for this.
Guard security.
Yeah, I got a fire at Centurion Bank.
Yeah, we got the alarm. Are there any secondary indications? Smoke or flame?
No.
It's probably a false alarm. We've been getting them in your area all night. See if it resets.
Oh, man, I don't know.
You sure you know which one to cut?
Yes. The alarm's always the green one.
Good girl.
Hey, man, I'm not waiting any longer. I'm calling the fire. Oh, it stopped. Sorry.
Hey, no problem. And, son?
Sir?
Good work.
Thank you, sir.
Here's David Stradler, who goes on to be a Dutch space pirate in The
All yours,
Expanse.
Fish.
So, how much do you want?
80,000, 90,000, 100,000.
Okay.
May I ask why you're closing your account with us today, sir?
Well, I just had this weird feeling that my money wasn't safe here anymore. Gentlemen, your communication lines are vulnerable. Fire access need to be monitored. Your rent-a-cops are a tad undertrained. Outside of that, everything seems to be just fine. You'll be getting our full report and analysis in a few days, but first, who's got my check?
It was such a good clip. And so Matt, I'm going to put you on the spot because you talked about doing red teaming, and you know, some of the companies that you did some of the most some of the most advanced red teams around. So can you tell us, like, did that strike you as realistic? Like, what hacker movie did you think this was realistic? How do you think other hacker movies have gotten realism? And maybe you can give us a red team war story, and then Emily will go to you.
Yeah, I mean, I love Sneakers. I said in the chat, it's my favorite, I think, of all time. Because of the red teaming, aspect of it, but then the storyline around the importance of information and the move towards information warfare. Information being one of the most powerful weapons that exists. Definitely have emulated the scene many times over the years. There was one bank that we did a red team against where we were actually able to create money that didn't exist. We had discovered a vulnerability that would allow us to engage in wire transfers that allowed for the depositing account to receive the money, but never deducted it from the crediting account. And then we moved it outside the bank, and I asked permission and giving the briefing to convert it to cash so I could walk in. And I basically wanted to replicate this scene. I wanted to come in with money that originally didn't exist. And having converted it to cash at a different financial institution, and remember being told, no, it's a whole world of hurt based on the fact that you created money that didn't exist that we've got to go reconcile. The minute you move it to cash, it becomes a much bigger problem for us. So never did get to walk in with the briefcase full of cash, but obviously aspired to do that many times over the course of my red teaming career.
And we cut off the end of the scene there where the bank teller who is typing out the check says, so you break into banks for a living to test security? And he says, yeah, it's a living. And she looks at the check and it says, not much of a limit. Yeah, it's not much of a living, is it? So I assume it's doing better now. Emily, your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, that's easily my favorite hacker film. I easily attribute it to the whole reason I'm actually pursuing any of this as a career. I like it the most because it's probably the broadest representation of all the different aspects of information, cybersecurity, physical pen testing that you could obviously get. I mean, obviously the first hack there in the opening and the scene is one of those where, you know, there's social engineering involved, there's actual electronic hacking, you know, computer systems involved, you know, physical pen testing, you know, all the things that are there. You know, if you are a company that is engaging a red team, you need to look at everything. I think this is one of the reasons why you go to conferences and you have Lockpick Village. That's one of my favorite places to kind of go and chill out at, because it's much more tactile. It's looking at physical security. Obviously, people have CISPs, wonder why are these questions in this book? Well, that's probably the reason why I need to look at physical security aspects. And I think what's really great about this movie is it's a holistic view of security, much more than a lot of the ones like, you know, even the Sacrosanct Hackers or Swordfish or The Net or any of these things, which really kind of focus on one aspect of it. And I kind of dig that it is really kind of, you know, we look nowadays, it's, you know, these are not so much, you know, mom and pop businesses, say as the bank, but, you know, when they stumble into this national security side of things, it shows you the scope of anywhere from your local bank to national security is where all these things kind of come into play, as well as the whole, you know, red team, blue team aspects of, you know, you hope that the NSA is as swift as they appear to in this movie. But you know, my favorite line is that, yeah, I think I posted the clip in there where Timothy Busfield, and I forget the other character, he's unfortunately passed away, and then Robert Redford are in there, you know, trying to discern where they're from, the FBI, CIA, NSA. You know, that's one of those cases I've actually used in times trying to educate people as to the roles that we do have to kind of separate the law enforcement aspects of you know, where we look at laws and stuff. So it's a really comprehensive movie, and you know, whenever I think somebody who wants to get into this this industry or this career space, I actually send them to that film. It's a kind of a joy to watch. And honestly, if you guys do this film and don't invite me back, I'm going to be very pissed off.
Great. And with that, let's get ready to run the last clip. We're starting to run out of time. We were able to get through a lot of the questions that I had thought about. We were able to get through a lot of the questions that the audience was able to put in the Q&A. Thank you for doing that. You still have time. If you can get one into the Q&A, please go ahead. And Lance, you can run that last clip whenever you're ready.
The loop, storing more and more power from the rest of the system.
9 numbers. 10, it's got the code, it's going to launch.
Colonel, kindly call the SAC, get me a launch status report. Major Dave, get me the president. Yes, sir. How you doing, Colonel?
Sir, all landlines out of the mountain are dead. I'm trying to break through on satellites.
Okay.
It's learning.
Greetings, Professor Falcon.
Hello, Joshua?
Strange game. The only winning move is not to play. How about a nice game of chess?
Yeah, just what a great movie. And so just as we're finishing off, and I think we'll go in the order of Amelie, Matt, and give Fumes the last word. Any last thoughts, right? And especially on that really powerful final statement, the only winning move is not to play.
Well, I was going to say I'll jump in because I was putting this in the chat here. I've actually used this line from Donald Rumsfeld, who I absolutely have no love for, but there are known knowns. That whole concept of dealing with unknowns and scenario finding and so forth is very prescient, especially since we are getting to more automation and dealing with imperfect data sets or incomplete data sets as it would be, and how people actually will react to their personal relationship to a decision-making process. And I think the interesting thing about like WarGames is that we've really kind of focused on, the aspects of what would happen with automation taking over that decision-making process without people in place. And I think, that, and I posted the Wikipedia article in there, which goes into greater depth, but there's a cognitive psychology method in there that really only humans currently have. We haven't gotten that into silicon at this point, that gets to that relation of the self to a decision-making process of like how to personalize that, what a decision relates to the outcomes as it is to the individual self, as well as the environment and their relationship to around it. And I think that's one of those next steps that we need to get into as we start to think about into reactivity, much as we're dealing with the current geopolitical state right now that we've obviously was triggered into live action last night. That a lot of people are online kind of throwing their own perspectives and stuff around, but they're only relating that to their own personal selves or their worlds that they've gotten into. And I think, phrases like this, as it kind of gets brought into the cybersecurity and digital realm, is one of those things I think we need to kind of dive deeper into, is what those kind of human elements actually add to this aspect.
Yep. Great, Matt.
Yeah, that's a great take. I'll offer another one as well that's always stuck for me, and that I feel like this was the ultimate triumph of the hacker mindset. And it had nothing to do with hacking a system. It had to do with thinking outside the boundaries that everybody else was thinking, to convince the computer that it couldn't win the game, right? That kind of challenge of playing against itself. So, I've talked about this when I've given keynotes and other talks at some of the hacker conferences, where it would be a shame if we take that, that hacker curiosity and that hacker mindset and only apply it to the problem of cybersecurity. So I love that it was applied in a broader domain context here, of obviously saving the world. But I think our challenge over the coming years is to figure out how do we apply that mindset to other problems that exist that are not in our domain of choice, that are not technology or cybersecurity problems.
Great. Fumes, final word?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thanks. And, the focus on Homeland Defense and the nexus clearly with, using automation to, either be on the loop or assist you in making decisions is it just hits really close to home. That suspense at the end is something that we should never forget, how that forces us into, whether it's on a stress curve to make a decision, but always being informed to make sure it is the best decision that we can possibly have with the information available. And, whether you use AI or advanced analytics, or like he said, hey, it's starting to learn. I think that's the point that I take away from this, is that, we go back to the training, we think about using it for defense or offense, but that winning posture is how I think of it, more than winning the game. And that winning posture is that credible deterrent, that takes an entire team. It's not just one system. It's just not just one person. All the different inputs that come into that. I think it's pretty powerful. And again, just enjoy the challenging mindset that it puts you in. I really like the way Emily and Matt highlighted those multiple aspects that go into this that the movie really brings out. It's timeless.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Oh, I just want to keep going. There's so much more to talk about. I just want to keep watching the entire film and go through the rest of the clips that we have, but we are unfortunately out of time. So let me give my thanks to everyone that joined, everyone that really participated in an amazing chat, to the panelists and to one of the people that have helped us on this, and from the advisory board, Akiko and others. And let me pass it back to Lance.
Thanks so much, Jay. Thank you all for joining us this evening, and thank you for a wonderful discussion. For those who are interested, you can follow along at Columbia DEFRAG. That's on Twitter, Columbia DEFRAG. In addition, we're going to keep the board open for until tomorrow. So if you want to check it out in more detail or leave any comments, you're more than welcome to. But this has been wonderful. I love the collaboration between the School of International Public Affairs and the School of the Arts. I think more collaborations like that, where the arts are mixing into other sides of both the university, but in addition to that, global and important topics. So thank you for including us, and I want to thank the team that was a part of this. And I'll kick it back to you, Jay.
All right. And with that, again, let me just say, I've been putting into the chat, this went just superbly well. And it wasn't just, again, we knew that we couldn't just have an event on hackers that people just sat back passively. We wanted to have interactive material, and you interacted not just with the board, but with the others. And I really felt like we had a more of a community. And in these dark times, right, you've really given me something to feel wonderful about. So my thanks to Amelie, to Matt, to Fumez, to all of your team, to everybody that's helping on cybersecurity, wherever they are, whatever flag they're under, trying to make everybody safer and to make cyberspace just a more amazing place. Thank you to all of you. And
don't forget Jen, who is actually keeping us safe, probably.
Of course. To Jen and the team at CISA, and my apologies to those. We wanted to do call outs to a whole lot of other people that were on board, and to friends that we saw on the board, Veer, my deputy, Nako and Takaki, that were working, to Lance, to all of your team. Thank you very much. And with that, let's close, and everyone have a good night.
This is a lot of fun. Thanks.